Did you have a helmet?
A lot of it depends on how big your waist is.
Oh boy.
Vapor rub under my nostrils.
Today on The Lens, on BodyCamBust, we're going to talk about standard police equipment that almost every police officer uses in the United States. Greg, I have a list here. You're going to tell me if it's accurate or not, and maybe you can elaborate on some other pieces of equipment that you've used over the years that it's not standardly issued by the police department. So, duty belt holds various tools and equipment. Can you explain what is exactly in this duty belt?
So the first thing that most people are going to notice is the gun, right? So obviously you've got your service weapon, your pistol. You'll have extra magazines. Most police agencies nowadays are using, semi-automatics, with magazines, right? Like your Glocks. If they're still carrying what we call a wheel gun, but a revolver, then they're going to have extra bullets. And usually those will be in speed loaders. But again, we're in the 21st century now. Most cops are carrying automatics, so they're going to have the magazines.
How many bullets per magazine?
Well, it depends on what gun you're carrying. Most of your standard, like 9mm, are going to hold 15 rounds in the magazine, then one in the chamber. I carried a 45, so my magazines carried 13. Then you're going to have your handcuffs. Nowadays, cops are carrying a combat tourniquet. A lot of times they'll carry that on their belt, or they're going to carry that on one of their pockets. Police pants have what's called a SAP pocket. So a lot of times that's where they'll put that.
When it comes to the firearms, you said most cops use a Glock, but what about shotguns and rifles? Is that standard?
I'm not saying most cops carry Glocks. I'm saying that's probably the most popular, weapon for police officers to carry. I would say Glocks and SIGs are the most common, probably if you were to look at all the agencies in the United States, Glocks and SIGs. And then shotguns, the standard issue in most departments would be the Remington 870. It's a very basic, very reliable, very serviceable shotgun. That's the shotgun you're going to see in most police cars.
And what would be the instances where a cop would want to use a shotgun versus a handgun?
A lot of times, if for example, what they call a hot stop, where you're doing a felony hot stop. So you've got the suspect vehicle stopped and they're wanted for something big. It's going to be like maybe a bank robbery or a homicide or something like that. And you'll have, a couple vehicles, police vehicles involved in that stop. And they're going to be pulling the suspects out of the car, using verbal commands, having them exit the vehicle. There's usually going to be one officer that'll have a shotgun. And it's just because, first of all, it's very intimidating seeing a big old gun like that pointed at you if you're a bad guy. And one 12 gauge round has 9 .32 caliber bullets in it. So it's very easy to hit your target if you're using a shotgun. Rifles you're going to use if there's like more of a long distance threat, again, and it's usually going to be something that's fairly a big crime, but yeah, that's going to be something if you need some accuracy at a long distance.
When most police officers, when they're driving around, well, specifically San Diego police, could they have a shotgun and a rifle in the back of?
Oh yeah, that's what we all did. And then there's another shotgun that we carry. It's a Remington 870, but it's specifically for beanbag rounds, that less lethal force. And then in addition to that, some officers carry a 40mm beanbag round, beanbag gun rather, for shooting 40mm beanbags, which will knock you on your butt.
And what about with regards to tasers? Is there one type of taser, two types of tasers? What type of tasers do cops usually walk around with?
Yeah, and that's another thing that'll be on the belt. It's an X something or other. I'm having a brain fart on the actual name, but it's like the X46 is usually what the officers are going to be carrying, and that you'll see that standard throughout most of the agencies that are using tasers. But that'll be the yellow. It looks like a gun, but it's yellow, usually yellow on the officer's belt, and it'll be on the weak hand side, usually with a cross draw. So they'll draw with their strong hand, but it's on the weak side.
And I'm curious, when it comes to handcuffs, how many pairs of handcuffs do cops carry around? Is it just one set, or like?
And that's usually going to be up to them. And also a lot of it depends on how big your waist is, you know? I used to carry just one set of handcuffs in my mid back, and then I would carry a couple extra pairs in my gear bag.
What about zip ties?
That's something you would keep in the trunk of your car, unless you're working a detail where you expect like mass arrests, and then if you're wearing like the cargo type, utility type police pants, they look like military, combat pants, you would have, keep those in one of your cargo pockets. On the belt, in addition to that, you're going to have a flashlight and an impact weapon, whether it's a baton or like an expandable baton. There was one point in my career where we were actually carrying nunchucks. They went away from those, but we had our nunchucks on our belts.
And what about the pepper spray? Is that standard or not?
And the pepper spray. Yeah, that's going to be standard.
So can you just list out all the items that can actually hook on to your belt?
Okay, so you have your magazines, and I carried 3 magazines. So I had 2 at the ready, and then one that was right down the center line of my buttons, basically, and that would be the first one that I would draw. Because the way I set up my magazines, they were straight up and down rather than horizontal, because they were indexed for me, so I could grab it and I could reload my gun without even looking. So you got your magazines, your revolver, or your automatic, your weapon. You got your handcuffs, your flashlight, your taser, your pepper spray, and like I said, some officers are carrying their tourniquet on their belt. And that's going to be the most common setup. And then your police radio. What
about like a notebook and pens? Is that standard or?
Yeah, but that's going to be in your shirt pocket. I would carry. Some officers carry their notebook in their back pocket. I would carry my notebook right here in my shirt pocket, and the pens are right there with the notebook. There's a section cut out in your pocket for the pins to stick in.
And I've seen in a lot of the body cam footage on our channel that cops quite often use their phones to take pictures, right? Is that pretty much the main, aside from their body cam, is that probably their main tool to take pictures, or do cops actually also have an external camera?
Well, it's funny, I was policing in a time when we were carrying Polaroid cameras in the back of our car. But then we went to digital cameras, and now a lot of officers are being issued departments, smartphones. So they're using those smartphones for the photos. If it's a major crime scene, then there's going to be evidence technicians that'll come out and process the scene, including all the photos, and they're shooting with the high-end cameras. My agency, San Diego PD, we also had officers that were trained. All officers are trained in collecting evidence and processing scenes, but the really big, intricate scenes, we had officers that went through special training. They're called agents, basically, and they could come in and process, like a real, involved scene, basically. And they had the higher end cameras and the other equipment used.
And what about knives?
Yeah, most officers carry a knife, and usually they'll carry that in one of their pockets. Again, police pants have what's called a SAP pocket, because there's an impact weapon called a SAP, and basically it looks like kind of like a exclamation point, and it's made of leather, and it's filled with like a powdered lead inside, so it's heavy. And it's used to smack people. Our agency, we didn't allow, that was not a permitted impact weapon use, but there are agencies still using SAPs, especially a lot of the counties, a lot of the sheriff departments.
So cops don't have like a multi-purpose knife that's standard issue, like a Swiss Army knife. That's not a thing.
My department didn't issue knives. Some I would imagine do, but my department allowed you to carry knives. And if you want to, you mentioned the belt. Some cops carry a multi-tool type knife on their belt. But again, that's an option. That's not a mandated piece of equipment. But I used to carry a little. Just a little Spyderco knife, to more as a utility knife, to cut, like if I was dusting for latent fingerprints, to just cut the tape and things like that, just a tool.
Now, I'm curious, did you ever have to put on some riot gear?
Oh yeah, I was actually part of my department, we had what was called Bravo team, which was the second wave that would come through, and we were more heavily equipped than the first responding officers. We had the heavier gear and more munitions, the 40 millimeters. We could shoot gas. We had gas grenades, and we also carried much longer batons. I mean, they were long.
Did you have a helmet?
Oh yeah, all of our officers are issued helmets. And they're all, Kevlar helmets with the really thick shields. So they have ballistic qualities. They'll resist bullets up to certain calibers, and then a pretty thick plexiglass shield that comes down that isn't flimsy at all. So it's very resistant as well.
Do you also have a handheld shield, or? We
didn't carry handheld shields. A lot of agencies do. We had gas masks. You mentioned that as part of the riot equipment. No, we did not use the shields. We used our bodies and our sticks. Basically, we formed very organized, tight lines.
What are the drawbacks of shields?
Well, you have something in your hand, that could be taken away, or you may pitch it when you need to use both hands. But there's also a lot of advantageous needs, I guess, for that shield. But we never used them.
And what about some miscellaneous equipment? I'm curious, gloves, is that standard, or is that something you would have to bring on your own?
No, gloves are standard now, and it's something that you'll go through a lot of gloves during your shift. You're you're putting your hands in pockets that no human being wants to put their hands in. You're touching. There's a lot of fluids that you're being exposed to that are, biohazard. Gloves, you go through a lot of, or when you're processing a scene, lifting fingerprints, like I said, this is one of the things that your average street cop will do, latent fingerprints. And it's very, very dirty. You're using this like a volcanic ash that gets everywhere. And as careful, you can be as careful as you can be, but you're always going to end up with, some smears of black on your face or, on your uniform. So that's, again, one of the uses for the gloves.
What about, because we've had quite a few videos about it on our channel, the portable breathalyzers. Is that something that cops just leave in the car, or are there actually cops walking around with a breathalyzer, a portable one in their pocket?
You're not going to carry that in your pocket. We carried those in a little, hard case in the car. And you would only pull that out if you're doing, a DUI and, a DUI investigation, driving under the influence investigation. And no, you're not carrying that around with you.
And since this channel is all about body cams, I'm going to assume the majority and all officers wear it, but are there officers that do not need to put on a body cam? And if there are, why?
Well, again, with my department, if you were in patrol and you were contacting the public, as part of your jobs, you're going to be wearing a body cam. The folks that would not be wearing body cams would be the employees that are more admin, working admin positions. A lot of detectives don't have to wear body cams when they're interacting with the public, but because, again, the effectiveness that our department has seen, they'll put them on when they're going out to do a follow-up.
So is there any equipment that you, Greg, use that your fellow officers didn't use? And are there any pieces of equipment your friends would use that you would never use?
One thing that I never used that a lot of cops use are the leather gloves. I saw so many officers, pulling out the leather gloves. They look cool. You look like Chips wearing these leather gloves when they're patting people down, going through their property, going through their pockets. But I think of what those gloves are making contact with, and then I'm watching that officer take them off their hands and fold them up and put them back in their back pocket. And I'm thinking, that's disgusting. I mean, there's a lot of contaminants on those gloves that they're using every day. They're contaminating the pocket of their pants now. So I would never use that. So one of the things that I carried in my gear bag was a small jar of Vicks VapoRub. And the reason I carried that were basically if I was responding to a call where it was a check the welfare. I mean, paint this scene here. You're getting a check the welfare. Neighbor hasn't seen their elderly neighbor in, like, say, 2 weeks. You get there, there's a pile of newspapers on their porch. The mailbox is overflowing with mail, and their car's in the driveway. No one's coming to the door, and you can see flies on the windows on the inside of the home.
Oh boy!
Quite often, yeah, you're gonna end up forcing entry and going into a scene that it's an odor that a lot of people have never experienced in their lives. And one of the ways that I use to kind of help me deal with it, because I had to be inside the house maybe for hours, waiting for the medical examiner to come and just doing my report. And so I'd put Vicks VapoRub under my nostrils, and it helped me kind of just get through that. Some of my friends would light up a cigar. But that's one thing that I always used to take. Another thing is I would keep a can of Lysol in my gear bag just to kind of quickly disinfect my police car. I would use that even just in my pre-shift cleaning of the car. I would kind of sterilize the back seat and also my steering wheel.
When you say your car, is it your car for the shift and someone else uses it? Or is it your car, no one else touches that car?
So here's how that works. A lot of smaller agencies, they have a take-home car, so they take their car home. My agency, it was a very large. San Diego is the second largest city in California, 8th in the country. We have a lot of cars, a lot of cops, and we shared the police cars. So I would get into work as early as I could, and I would go out to the pool of police cars. We used to have the cars were assigned to beats, but now the way it is it's just assigned by watch. So, if you're working day shift, it was a first watch car. I tried to find the nicest car I could, and then I would go through a regiment of, making sure that it was going to be a clean office space for me to be sitting in for 10 hours. And, so I would thoroughly clean my cars every shift. And sometimes after certain suspects were booked into jail, so they were now out of my car, I would do a little spray in the back seat after that. I had people, with lice and all sorts of things in the back of my car. It's not the cleanest job.
Well, as always, Greg, thanks for sharing your insight. And for those of you who are new to the channel, please subscribe and check out these other great videos.